be screwed, feel my own adrenaline. Yeah, I do just what I do, and I hope you let me in, yeah.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to Cypherfics. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the first part of What If Ichigo Finds Lelouch in Bleach Verse. Special note, this fanfic is written in a masterpiece of Draconishero 21 on fanfictionnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Yes, I destroy worlds, create worlds. I am ready to enter hell. I opened my eyes to find myself lying on my back in a clearing in between two forests. There was a blue sky and white clouds above me. Did I survive? I wondered. I sat up and felt my chest. No bloodstain. I looked down. I was wearing my casual clothes, my red jacket, my black sleeveless shirt, and my navy blue jeans. But that doesn't matter, I was killed wearing my emperor robes. Did CC refuse to let me die? I looked around. No nearby water, she can't be washing out my clothes. I opened my shirt and spread my hand across where I was stabbed. No scar either, even when CC was injured, there were still remnants of her blows. I stood all the way up and rebuttoned my shirt. So I succeeded in dying. I looked around some more, feeling the wind and hearing birds. So then where the hell am I? This place is too peaceful to be hell. Or if it is, it's certainly not like how I imagined it. I closed my eyes. So now what? Suddenly I noticed a peculiar oddity. With my eyes closed and my mind clear, I could sense several presences. When I opened my eyes they were gone. But when I closed them and focused I could sense them again. What's this strange phenomenon? I questioned. Why can I all of a sudden sense other people? Is this some form of afterlife power? I should investigate it when I have the chance. For right now, I'll let this power lead me towards shelter. I followed the presences in my head when I felt I was lost and eventually found myself out in a market square. People seemed to be going about their daily lives and everyone, for the most part, didn't seem miserable. I closed my eyes and scratched my head. This place sure ain't hell. I laughed to myself. Again though, with my eyes closed I sensed those presences again. But I sensed less presences than there were people around me. Does this mean I can only sense certain people? But if so, what do all these people have in common that I can sense? I opened my eyes. And how do they differ from the ones I can't? Hey, move it! I heard someone shout and then got rammed from behind and sent tumbling across the ground. I got up and ran over to the guy that was pushing the cart that rammed me. Hey, what the hell was that for? I demanded to know. He didn't respond. I grabbed his shoulder and turned him around to face me. Answer me, damn you. Sorry, he said with no flicker of emotion. You see, my business isn't doing too well lately and my wife is sick and you just happen to be in my way. No, it can't be. I started to back away from the guy. He blinked a few times. Hey, what do you want, you brat? He shouted. Sorry, I ran away from him and over in between two stalls and stopped to catch my breath. Do I really still have the Geass? Why didn't I lose it when I died? Shouldn't the contract have ended with my death? I looked around and the shop next to me had a fragment of glass of which I could see my reflection in it sitting on the counter. I walked in front of the stand. Mind if I look at this for a moment? Not unless you plan on buying it, the merchant snapped. I had no time to deal with self-centered people. I had to know if I still had my Geass. Oh, I'm sorry, allow me to rephrase my statement. I looked at the merchant in the eyes. I'm borrowing this and I'll give it right back. He changed as if he was under the influence of my Geass. Yes, go ahead, he said. I held up the glass to look at it, only my right. I showed the Geass emblem reflected in it. I put my finger up to my left eye. The contact lens was still there. I removed it. Both eyes reflected the Geass. I put the lens back and threw down the glass in disgust. It shattered. No. I shouted and ran away as far as I could. I ran and I ran and I ran with my eyes shut tight, disbelieving that I was cursed even after death. Instinctively my eyes flew open when I realized I would have ran straight into a lake if I ran any farther. I dropped to my knees and looked at my reflection in the water, seeing my Geass reflected in my right eye. I still had this curse. Even after death I could not go on and be at peace with myself. Calm yourself, Lelouch. Romans 6 Britannia. I looked up and across over the lake. Who's there? I called out. There was no answer. Answer me. I covered my right eye with my palm and laughed. I'm getting too old to be hearing voices at my age. Excuse me, I heard someone call out. I turned around to see a small girl with strawberry blonde hair, with bright blue eyes, her hair covering her left eye, run up to me. She was dressed in dirt brown rags. Her top had torn seams on her upper right shoulder. What is it? I asked her, turning around and clutching my right eye. She held up her hand, palm facing up. There was a small object in her hand. It was my contact lens. I saw you drop this when you got hit by that shopping cart. I wanted to return it to you, so I followed you here. I see, I responded. Thanks for returning it. You're welcome, the young girl said, all bubbly. What's your name? She asked me. Normally it's polite to give your name before asking someone else to give theirs, I told her. She smiled brightly. I'm Rengoku Matsumoto, she said. So what's your name, mister? I'm Lelouch, Lelouch Lamperouge, I told Rengoku. Nice to meet you, Lelouch-kun, she said with a smile and extended her hand up to me. I shook it. Say you wouldn't mind helping me find my friend, would you? He always leaves without telling me where he's going, and I worry about him. Well, if you want something from me, perhaps you can give something to me, I stated. She took 2 steps back in a timid fashion. What brought on that reaction? I shook my head. There are 219 different reasons I can think of that would produce that reaction, but none of which should affect her if I amend my statement. I just want some information. I'm new here, so perhaps you can help me. Oh, I see, so you just arrived here. Well, this is Rukengai, Rengoku told me. It's the area that takes up the majority of this world, called the Soul Society. Soul Society? I questioned. Well, I mean, you died, right? Rengoku asked me. So this is the afterlife after all. But Soul Society? I never heard of this afterlife. As I pondered, a realization came to me. Wait a minute, this girl's just a kid. Wait a minute, does that mean you also? Huh? Oh, yeah, but, Rengoku looked down at herself. It's strange. I used to be so much older than this when I was alive. She cupped her developing chest, and I used to be a lot bigger than this too. She dropped her hands at her sides and looked up at me. But also there are souls here that were born here. But of course I'm not one of them. I see. So that means souls here must live a lot longer, so they may degrade according to their age. I looked back at the river. But then why am I as I was when I died? Why do the same laws not apply to me? I looked at my hand. I wonder. Rengoku began coughing. What's wrong? It's you're, she gasped as she hit the ground. Me? I didn't do anything. I still thought it would be best if I put some distance between Rengoku and me. She took a few deep breaths and stood up. I see, so you have spiritual power. Spiritual power? I questioned. It means you're special here. Not all souls have it, but those who do are said to be gifted. Just now your spiritual power leaked out, and you have so much of it that it caused me to collapse, Rengoku said to me. I see, so I can't be near you, I said, feeling melancholy. Another curse to add onto the pile. Now you can come near me. You just have to learn to control your spiritual power, Rengoku said to me. How do I do that? I asked. Rengoku opened her mouth to speak, but then hung her head. So she has no idea, I thought. Ah, well, you could become a soul reaper, but... She put her hands behind her back and started squirming in place. Ah, well, you seem like a good person, and well, my other friend always leaves me alone, and well, I get lonely, and so. You want me to live with you, is that it? I asked her. Sorry, but I'm a loner, I told her. What's this you said about soul reapers? Rengoku seemed disappointed in my refusal, but answered my question nonetheless. Soul reapers are souls that have gained special powers by joining the military faction, the Gaudy 13. Only souls with spiritual power and nobles can become soul reapers. If you tried, you could easily become one. Why does the afterlife need a military organization? I asked. Well, not all souls become pluses like us. Some more evil and corrupted spirits become hollows, at least that's what I've heard. I've never actually seen a hollow, but apparently they're these evil monsters that prey upon innocent souls to grow stronger. They also prey upon living humans. The Soul Reapers protect us from those creatures. They're also like law enforcement here in the Soul Society, Rangaku explained. My fist clenched. So monsters in this world exist even in the afterlife, do they? Rangaku continued her explanation. Soul Reapers purify these hollows and purge them of their sins. At least that's what I've heard. I relaxed a little. It was good to know that the military here prided itself in protecting the weak. I was reminded of the Black Knights. I think I might join, I said aloud. I walked past Rangaku. Wait, she ran forward and grabbed my sleeve. I looked at her. She looked like troubled as she looked at me. Won't you please stay? She asked. I told you before, I said, shaking her off. I walk alone. I continued to walk only to realize Rangaku was following me. Are you going to follow me until I change my mind? I thought you can't get too close to me anyway, I said, glancing back at her. There is another way to control your spiritual power. Well, not necessarily control it, but the more I stick around you, the more I become used to you. You know, like an immunity, she said. That's immunity, I corrected. I told you before though. I put my hands in my pockets and continued to walk. Rangaku wasn't following me, but after I took 3 steps she started crying. I turned around. What? Are you crying because you aren't getting your way? I thought you said you used to be older. Suddenly a makeshift spear landed just to my right. Any closer left and I would have lost a finger. I turned around and saw a kid with silver hair and his eyes shut. He was dressed in similar rags to Rangaku. Ah nuts, I missed ya. Jin, Rangaku recognized him. See, and here's your friend, so quit crying will you? I asked her. Ran-chan, Jin went over and picked up his spear. Were you crying cause you wanted to know where I was? That was part of it, I guess, she sniffed. I continued to walk on. Their business was not my business. It wasn't long though before that damn spear sailed over my shoulder and blocked my path. I turned around. You got a problem, kid? I got a couple of choice words for ya. Ya seem kinda out of place to me in those clothes, see? And on top of that, I don't let anyone who makes Ran-chan cry just walk away, Jin said to me. She's only crying because I've decided to become a Soul Reaper rather than staying with the two of you. I told her a couple of times before she started turning on the waterworks that I'm a loner, but she wouldn't listen, I explained. Being a loner ain't exactly the best idea, you know. And besides, it's a long walk from here to the Seratai where da Soul Reaper folk reside. You're best stickin' with us till to send a patrol unit down here and then go back with da patrol, Jin told me. Why's that? When you're alone, you make your own rules. When you're alone... Jin cut me off. When you're alone, you're da perfect target for hollow bait. And you, my friend, are mighty tasty lookin'. If I were a hollow, I'd find your appearance and spiritual power ta be absolutely delicious. If you want ta get eaten fine by me. You're bluffing, I stared at him. If I were bluffin', I wouldn't have been carrying this spear around. Ran-chan's supposed to stay in our little hut whenever I go out. But I guess I took too long this time, he scratched his head. You take too long a lot of times, Jin, and you never tell me where you're going either, Rangaku snapped at him. My bad, Jin apologized. He looked at me. Come on, big guy, you don't want ta have it on your conscience if something bad happens ta this poor innocent little girl, do you? Rangaku put on the most innocent look she could. Isn't that what the Soul Reapers are for? I asked. The Soul Reapers can't exactly keep track of every little soul. It's not uncommon for 2 little brats like Ran-chan and me to suddenly die or starve to death. If we do though, it's no skin of their backs. We'll just become reincarnated as living souls, Jin answered. They don't care? That didn't sit right with me. Da Soul Reapers pride themselves in protecting us, but they can't always protect all of us. It's survival of the fittest for us non-Soul Reaper folk, Jin continued. Please stay, Lelouch-kun, Rangaku looked at me with pleading eyes. For a moment I thought I was looking at Nunnally before she was blind and crippled, but I closed my eyes and shook my head to the side slightly and dashed away such images. Jin always brings back more food than we need every time he goes out. We can sustain you until a patrol unit comes by. I looked to the side, avoiding eye contact, and scratched the back of my head. I suppose I can stay. I mean, it's not like it's a big rush. It really wasn't. The Gotai the 13th of may not be able to protect everyone, but at least they were trying. That would change when I got there. The Soul Society had existed this long till I got here. A bit of time spent protecting these kids wouldn't make much of a difference till I got there and worked my way up to make them a more efficient group. Then it's settled. You'll stay with us till Da Patrol unit comes by. Follow me, Jin took off. Come on, Lelouch, Rangaku ran off. Hey, wait a minute, I called out. I ran after them, and they started getting really far ahead of me. Damn it, at this rate I'll lose them. I closed my eyes as I ran only for that strange power to kick in. I stopped. I can sense Rangaku and Jin. With my eyes closed, using my senses I followed not where they were, but where I thought they might be heading. Like a blind person I used the sixth sense to navigate my way towards Rangaku and Jin. Eventually I realized they had stopped moving, and I opened my eyes to see us in front of a wooden cabin. There was a small pond nearby and a log set out in front of the house. Oh my, did you get here by sensing us, Lelouch? Jin asked. I guess I did, I said, holding my head. You're gonna be a great soul reaper if you can already sense people with spiritual power like that, Jin told me. I'm really out of shape, I admitted. Ah well, being a soul reaper should fix that then. I've been in Rukengai a while, and I've seen even some folks as big as whales move like Dara in top form, Jin stated. Provided you can handle the rigorous trainin' I hear about, you'll be fine. He walked past me. Anyway, I gotta get going and get back to what I was doing. Stay here wit Ran-chan, would ya? Hey, hold on now. I thought you said being a loner was a bad thing. I looked at him. Jin looked up at the sky. Judging from the position of the sun, it's still midday. Hollow attacks become more frequent at night. I got time. Then we'll all go together, I said to him. I move faster on my own. I need you to stay here wit Ran-chan while I go out and get some food. You're not fast enough to hunt, and you're not crafty enough like I am to steal without getting caught. I can spot my own kind. You're not my kind, but you're close. He opened his eyes and looked at me. The blue color and the fact that they were only open halfway made him look really creepy with that big huge smile on his face. You're lucky Ran-chan likes ya. Like I told you before, you look mighty tasty to hollows, and I enjoy swallowing up tasty looking people like a snake. He then took off, leaving me feeling rather disturbed. You have a weird friend, I told Rangaku. Jin's might be a bit off-center, but he's got some good qualities to him. I mean, he might leave all the time, but he always comes back. He's very reliable, especially when I ask him for something, Rangaku defended the kid. Well, anyway, the place looks nice, I said and walked up to the door. Let's see the inside. Inside the house there were no working lights except for a couple of candles. There was a low rising table, some crates scattered about, a single bed and a pillow and some blankets. There was no food stored anywhere visible. How do you guys survive without stored food? I asked. In Soul Society you only get hungry if you have spiritual power, and even then only if your power is exhausted. But Jin stores the leftovers in the crates, Rangaku said, and opened one, revealing food that was thrown about inside the crate. There were stacks of crackers, some tomatoes, some apples, some bananas, and a couple of carrots and potatoes. Help yourself. Thanks, I said, going for an apple. I examined it to make sure it wasn't rotting, cleaned off some dirt, and looked around. What are you looking for? Rangaku asked. Well, this should be properly washed, shouldn't it? I asked. You can use the pond if you want, but I've never gotten sick after I brushed the dirt off, Rangaku stated. I sighed. I guess immune systems are higher here in the Soul Society. Well, bottoms up. I bit into the apple. A few hours later. Nightfall. Jin came back as Rangaku and I were playing chess. Apparently she and Jin had a set locked away in one of the crates, as well as some other games like checkers, tic-tac-toe, and go. I was going easy on Rangaku, but I wasn't about to let her win either. Ah, so you're playing chess, are ya? Jin asked as he dragged a big bag behind him into the house. Yeah, I said and moved my queen to e4. Checkmate, I told Rangaku. Hey, she got mad that I had led her on the whole game. What's in the bag? I asked Jin. Well, Jin reached into it and pulled out a pillow and a few blankets. You need a place to sleep. It seemed like that stuff had been taking up most of the room in the bag. He pulled out a big object. I also got this. He leaned up a mirror on the far side of the wall. Now you don't have to use the pond to see your reflection, Ran-chan. Ah, wow, it's perfect. Rangiku ran over to the mirror and began posing in front of it. Jin finished unpacking, which included a couple of loaves of bread and a bucket, which I could only assume would be for getting the water out of the pond for drinking. He sat down at the table in front of me. You play? He asked. Yeah, I nodded. I'm really good at this game, you know? Jin's smile widened. You want to go around? I asked. Sure thing, Jin said. I have to warn you though, if you're gonna tell me you're good at this, I'm not going to hold back like I did with Rangiku, I said, resetting the board. Would be a waste if you did, Jin told me. We started playing and I could tell right away that Jin was no amateur. He was good, but I was better. He was surprised that after I moved the pawn in front of my king that I moved my king. That's an interesting move, he commented. If the king does not move into battle, his men won't follow, I told Jin. The game continued, and then Rangiku started watching. After a while longer, I lost half my pawns, a bishop and a rook. Jin had lost both his knights, almost all of his pawns and one rook. Currently, it was his turn. He moved his white squared bishop. Check. I took his bishop with a nearby pawn. He moved one of his remaining pawns. I took it with my queen. Check. He moved his king out of the way. I moved one of my pawns to the edge of the board and took back my rook. Checkmate. Jin looked at the board and opened his eyes to examine it more thoroughly. He looked at me, closed his eyes and smiled. What do you know? You got me. Wow, Lelouch, you must be really good if you can beat Jin, Rangiku told me. How could you tell? Don't you two just play by yourselves? I asked. Nah, Jin said and went over to one of the grates and pulled out a plaque. I got this a couple of months ago. The plaque was an award for victory in a chess tournament in the market square. According to this, Jin placed second. I would have won completely, but I got beat by a Shinigami. I remember him clear as day, square-rimmed glasses and brown hair. I don't remember his name, but the next time I see that guy, I'm gonna have you play him. I think you might be able to beat him. That's high praise. I thought you didn't like me, I teased. Who said I didn't like ya? When I said you looked delicious, I was complimenting ya, he said. He looked at the window. The moon was out. Anyway, we should get some sleep. Pick a spot on da floor and set up da pillows and blankets there, okay? I set up my blankets and the pillow next to the chess table. I laid my coat down on one of the nearby crates. Rangiku climbed onto the bed and Jin set up his blankets next to her bed. I lay down and closed my eyes. Good night, Jin. Good night, Lelouch-kun, Rangiku said. Night, Ran-chan, Jin said. Good night, Rangiku, I said. I was asleep within minutes only to be shaken awake. I opened my eyes to see Rangiku. She looked frightened. It was still dark out and I could hear Jin snoring. Rangiku, it's still the middle of the night. What's wrong? I asked, with a groaning tone. I had a nightmare, she said. Flashback. Nunnally, what's wrong? I asked her. Nunnally sobbed. I had a nightmare. I sat up and held Nunnally. Hey, it's okay, don't cry. Your big brother is not going to let any bad things happen to you. You sleep with me tonight, okay, Nunnally? I'll keep the bad dreams away. Thank you, Lelouch, she said, nuzzling into me. End flashback. I sighed. Being with her is going to be so nostalgic. Do you want to sleep with me? I asked Rangiku. She nodded meekly. I lifted up the covers for her. All right, come on. She snuggled into my chest and put my arm around her. I'm glad I asked you to stay with us, Lelouch. Jin's like a friend, but in the short time you've been here, you've been like a big brother to me. Rangiku then fell asleep in moments. Have a pleasant dream, Rangiku. The next morning I decided I'd devote most of the day learning about this new power I developed. The power I had to sense spiritual pressure. When I got up, there was a note hanging on the wall. It was addressed to me, and it was from Jin, although it was more of a threat than a whereabouts note. It read, Dear Lelouch, I appreciate your help in Ran-chan, but if I see you two getting cuddly again, there will be consequences. Jin. I sighed and just pocketed the note. I went outside. I still had a lot of unanswered questions for myself, like my wardrobe change and how rustic the Soul Society was. I figured with all the advanced technology and dead soldiers of Britannia, even some of my own Black Knights, there would be some form of scientific advancement. But everything was all woodsy and relatively peaceful. I wondered if perhaps there was some reasonable explanation for all of this, but I decided there was no point in worrying about it. My past was behind me. If I saw any familiar faces, I would pretend like I didn't know them. It would be hard enough leaving Rangaku and Jin when the Soul Reaper patrol came through. Rangaku seemed like she needed some form of moral support, and Jin needed a role model of some sort. Unfortunately, that's not the kind of person I could be for them. I sat down on the ground and meditated using the position Buddhist monks would take. I let out slowed, controlled breath and focused my mind. There was a flash of color. My eyes were still closed, but I seemed to be able to see another world entirely with them closed. I could see what I guessed were souls with spiritual energy. They looked like little blue and white fireballs. The closest one was within a few decameters of me. That was obviously Rangaku. As I continued to focus, I could sense other spiritually empowered entities throughout the marketplace. They were relatively weak. In fact, most of them were weaker than Rangaku. I focused on two spiritual pressures, one randomly weak one and Rangaku's. I noticed that there were several differences between the two souls besides just distance from me and size. If I honed in on Rangaku, her soul would flash a bright reddish pink. It was impossible for me to identify the other soul. It was too weak and too far away. I opened my eyes and I lost sight of the soul world. I decided I'd try a little experiment. If I could concentrate and hone in on Rangaku, then maybe I could use her as a homing beacon of sorts. I went inside the house. Rangaku was still asleep. I got out a piece of paper and wrote, "Went out to test an experiment. Don't leave the house. Thanks, Lelouch." It was imperative that Rangaku stayed put. I was going to go out into the Soul Society and get myself incredibly lost. Then I would follow Rangaku's spiritual pressure back to the house to see if it was possible to identify and hone in on a particular soul. I walked slowly and tried to avoid going off the pathways. Eventually, I found myself in the center of town. I stood still and concentrated. The world of souls opened to me again. I concentrated and searched for that reddish-pink aura I had identified with Rangaku earlier. After a few minutes, I noticed it. It was faint, but I located the reddish-pink soul I had associated with being Rangaku's. I turned my body in the direction I detected the soul and opened my eyes. I was facing towards the left end of the markets. I proceeded in that direction, passing by the townsfolk and making my way back towards where I detected Rangaku's soul. When I got back to the forest, I focused and tried to detect Rangaku again. I located the same reddish-pink soul at 45 degrees to my left. I opened my eyes and went in that direction, passing by trees and eventually came to a clearing. I looked off in the distance and just barely made out Rangaku and Jin's house. I took a good look around the area and committed it to photographic memory. I then focused on Rangaku's soul and, with my eyes closed, walked all the way back to the house. I sidestepped the lake. I made sure not to lose my footing when I passed over that dip in the plateau and made sure to take into account the fallen tree trunk that lay at the base of the house's grounds. I put my hand out, eyes still closed, and touched the front of the house. I believed myself to be equidistant from the front window and the door. I opened my eyes and I was right. I smirked, piece of cake. I heard footsteps and Rangaku came outside the house. "Oh, Lelouch, you're back," she held up my message. "I got your note. I didn't leave the house. Like a good girl," she curtsied. I smiled at her. "That's right, you did. Thank you, Rangaku." I bent down and pat her head. Kids her age needed a morale boost like that when they do the right thing and call attention to it, so I've read. "So how long have you been up for?" I asked Rangaku as I walked inside. "Not long," she answered. I opened one of the crates and took out an apple. "You didn't see Jin on your walk, did you?" she asked. I shook my head and went outside to the nearby pond and washed off the apple. I bit into it. After I swallowed, I said, "Say, Rangaku, what do you know about Soul Reapers?" "Not much other than what I told you yesterday," Rangaku answered. "Was there something specific you wanted to know?" she asked. "You said the Gotai was a military organization," I said, tossing the apple up and down in my hand. "Do new recruits undergo training?" "Sorry, I don't know much about Soul Reapers. Jin knows more than I do. You can ask him when he comes home," Rangaku told me. "All right then," I said, catching the apple and taking out another huge bite. I set the apple to float in the pond and tossed my jacket aside and put myself in a push-up position on the flat ground. "What are you doing?" Rangaku asked me. Exercise, I responded, holding my position. Until I learn more information about the qualifications to become a Soul Reaper, I'm going to treat it like regular military training, and to do that I'll need to get in shape. My stamina and physical abilities are limited. If it wasn't for the fact that I was taking that walk at entirely my own pace, I would have been exhausted by the time I reached the front door. Can I watch? Rengoku asked me. If you want to, I said. Rengoku sat down on the ground and watched me. I still hadn't moved from my idle position. Come on, it's only push-ups. I stared at the ground. I can do this. I pushed down low to the ground and with tremendous effort pushed up. Every muscle in my body was screaming in agony. Exercise and physical ability was totally not my forte, but I wasn't going to quit. If Suzaku could become a hardened soldier, so could I. Granted, Suzaku was already an exercise nut from the first time I met him. But this is something I had to do. I did another push-up. It was destructive on my body. I pushed back down on the ground and just collapsed, panting. These things were exhausting. I chuckled to myself. If Cece could see me now, she'd probably think I'm incredibly pathetic. She'd call me a fool for trying and that I'm acting out of character. Somehow, just thinking of that immortal witch's response to my actions drove me to keep going. I pushed up with vigor. It hurt, but as I'd heard Suzaku tell me before, no pain, no gain. I pushed down and pushed back up again. I repeated this process until I had done 10 of these exhausting things, including the first 2 I did. I collapsed on the ground, panting louder than before. Ha, ha, you look like a dog with heat stroke Lamperouge-san, I heard Jin's voice. Oh, hello Jin. I looked at him with an antagonistic smile as I lifted my head so that my chin rested on the ground. Tryin' ta get in shape to become a Soul Reaper, eh? Jin asked me. Ain't that obvious? I asked. Jin's constant smile widened. Well, I don't know what you're doing, but ya ain't never gonna be a Soul Reaper doing dat. Then what do you suggest? I asked him with a serious look. Well, from what I know, Soul Reaper folk focus on a few areas of combat, plus intellectual stuff. The fightin' is broken up into speed, hand-to-hand, magic spells or kaido as they call it, and practice with your cool sword you get called your Zanpakuto, Jin answered. I rolled over onto my back and looked at Jin upside down. Zanpakuto. It's a special weapon dat Soul Reapers get dat you can communicate with. It becomes your weapon, and it's a part of you. Before you even think about becoming a Soul Reaper, you got to have da spiritual pressure to manifest a Zanpakuto. So they're empathetic weapons of a sort? I asked inquisitively. I guess you could think of dem like dat. I really don't know much about dem since I ain't a Soul Reaper myself. But I keep an ear low to the ground is all, Jin answered. He then walked out of my vision range. I turned my head and he handed something to Rengoku. "Ooh, pretty," she said. Jin had handed her a bright silver stone. I finally found the strength to sit up and did so. Say Lamperouge-san, how about another game of chess? Huh? Sure, but why? I asked him. Da buzz round the marketplace is dat dera's another chess tourney comin' up. You are going to compete, aren't ya? Jin asked me. Of course I will, I said, rising to my feet and wiping the dirt off my hands. I walked over to where I had thrown my coat and put it back on. Jin and I sat in front of the chessboard. I was black, he was white. Playing against Jin was a challenge. He was rather good at the game, better than Clovis anyway, but he wasn't nearly as skilled as Schneasel. I took one of his pawns with my knight. He responded by taking it with his bishop. I then moved my rook that had been behind my just taken knight only a turn before to the opposite end of the board. Check. Jin took my rook with his rook. I then took that rook with my queen which had been behind the just taken rook. Checkmate. Although Jin could move his king out of the row, my queen was in the only spot it could move, put it in moving distance of one of my bishops. Wow, you're good, Lelouch, Rengoku clapped. Another round, Jin said, the smile having faded from his face. Jin and I played a couple more games until the sun was at its peak in the sky. He lost every one of them. After the last one he stood up and stretched. Ha, I just can't beat ya, Lamperouge-san. His smile was back in full swing. What say we head for the marketplace? That tournament I mentioned earlier is today after all. All right, I said and got up. As I walked alongside Jin and Rengoku, I decided to try and identify Jin's soul in case the time ever came that I needed to track him down. As I concentrated though, I felt tension on my coat tail. Rengoku was grabbing onto it. She was panting. And this is why I need to be a soul reaper. Ran-chan, you okay? Jin asked her. I'm fine. It's Lelouch-kun's spiritual pressure again, she gasped. Sorry, I said. I then noticed Jin wasn't having any trouble. How come you're not panting? I asked. I got enough spiritual pressure, Dad. I'm not affected by yours, he smiled. I decided not to try and hone in on Jin's spiritual pressure for the moment. It seemed my concentration caused me to expel my own spiritual pressure, which affected Rengoku. I decided that the next time she and I were left alone that I would help her get used to my spiritual pressure so that we wouldn't have incidents like this. If I could practice controlling the energy I expelled, then I could be ahead of the rest of the curve when I became a soul reaper. Rengoku had me give her a piggyback ride the rest of the way to the market square. It wasn't any worse than when I used to carry Nunnally around when she couldn't walk. I was sweating by the time Jin, Rengoku, and I reached the market square, but I'd have to get used to feelings like that. I removed my jacket and tied it around my waist to reduce the heat circulating through my body. Jin waved me over to the booth where people were signing up for the tournament. The man behind the counter was tan with a beard and was wearing green rags with a bandana tied around his head. Ikemaru-san, I see you are here to compete again. And I haven't seen you around before, he looked at me. He's new, Jin said. Well, we're always eager to receive new challengers. Name please, the man requested. Lamperouge Lelouch. I had taken notice of the culture around here in my brief time here. It was extensively Eastern in style, and both Jin and Rengoku used honorifics to refer to me, so I figured giving my last name first was the intelligent decision. My train of thought was broken when Jin pulled on my pant leg and said, "Off to the right about 60 degrees, near the opposite markets." I looked where he asked me and saw a group of Shinigami. They were talking with some citizens. I didn't even need to close my eyes to feel the blinding power coming from the one in the center. He had brown hair and glasses. Is that the guy who beat you? I asked Jin. Yeah, that's him. Jin dropped his accent. If I can't beat him, you have to, okay. I'll try, I said. I may not be the best soldier material, but I can damn well be a formidable chess opponent. The group of Shinigami walked towards, and I sidestepped to let the brown-haired man sign his name. The companion on his left was a man with shoulder-length black hair, and the companion on his right a short, fat guy with a bald head, but arms that looked like they could pull tires right off a car. His eyes, nose, and mouth looked rather small on his big head. The man who beat Jin turned to look at me. I don't believe I've seen you around these parts, he said to me, adjusting his glasses. This is my second day in Soul Society, I responded. That's some interesting attire you're wearing, he said with a small smile. Is that how you introduce yourself to someone? I folded my arms. By mocking their apparel? I wasn't mocking. It's just very unique. What's your name? The man asked. Normally it's polite to give your name first, I responded. Too true, the man stated politely. I am Aizen Sasuke, and you are? Lamperouge Lelouch, I responded. Pleased to meet you, Lamperouge-san, Aizen extended his hand to me. If you're good, I look forward to possibly playing against you. Same to you, I said, shaking his hand. I heard you beat my friend here last time, and I beat him, so I'm wondering just how much of a challenge you're going to be. I beat a lot of opponents last time. Who are you referring to? Aizen said to me as our hands released. Behind you, I pointed to Jin. Aizen turned around. Ah yes, you, the young prodigy, Aizen seemed to recognize Jin. You put up quite the fight last time. This ain't gonna be a repeat performance of last year, Aizen Fukutecho. This year, Jin held his thumb upside down. You're going down, either by me or by Lampergau-san. We'll see about that, Aizen said and walked away. Fukutecho. That's the Japanese honorific for vice captain. Why did Jin? I looked at Aizen as he walked away and took notice of an armband on his left upper arm. I see, so he's a member of high authority in the Gotai. Maybe if I beat him, he could be my ticket into the Soul Reapers. It's worth a shot. The tournament was a 64-entrant tier elimination. Aizen, Jin, and I were placed far away from each other on the board, but Aizen and Jin would face off against each other first. If I got all the way to the finals, I would play winner. My first match in the tournament was against a guy who was clearly an amateur. The match was over in less than 3 minutes. After he was beaten, I held up my hand, snapped my fingers, and said, "Next." My second and third opponents didn't fare much better against me. They lasted a bit longer, but I had them at checkmate somewhere in between 5 and 7 minutes. My fourth match provided me with a bit of challenge, and then we were at the semi-finals. I had finished warming up by this point, and after a 10-minute game I was done. I then went to where Aizen and Jin were playing, since I knew I would play winner. I watched the board carefully. The rules specifically stated no outside help or suffer disqualification, but there was nothing to help. After 2 turns and careful analysis of the match from the point I started my observation, I already could see how the rest of the game was going to go. Aizen would move his queen and check Jin's king. Jin would take out his queen with his pawn, to which Aizen would move his knight to check Jin's king again, to which Jin would take Aizen's knight with his king. Aizen would move his last remaining pawn and take back his queen. Jin would check Aizen's king with his rook. Aizen would take the rook with his bishop, putting it at an exact spot to check Jin's king and ultimately cause checkmate by Jin's queen, rook and bishop. I watched things unfold precisely as I predicted them. If Aizen was this easy to read, the match wouldn't be too hard. It would be challenging, but I'd still win. I sat down at the chess table. "So, you and me, just as desired," I said, cracking my knuckles and resetting the board. "How did your previous matches go?" "With the exception of Jin, they were all just amateurs. How about you?" Aizen asked. "No one's really been able to hold my attention all that well. Now shall we play?" I was black, so Aizen went first. I moved the pawn in front of my king on my first turn and moved my king on the second. "Interesting choice, Lamperouge-san," Aizen told me. "I'll tell you what I tell everyone else. If the king does not move into battle, his men won't follow," I told him. "An interesting philosophy, but philosophy does not win chess," he returned. "Are we taunting each other, or are we playing a game?" I asked. The match continued as I carefully calculated every move I made and tried to read anything I could off of Aizen. The only reason I knew how he would beat Jin was because I knew how Jin played, and his moves were exactly what I would have done. Aizen was on my level. His tactics were different than mine, but he was definitely a skilled chess master. Still, I played against someone who could quite literally read my mind. Compared to that, this was child's play. I moved my pawn in front of Aizen's rook at the end of the board. He took it, and I placed my bishop behind it. Aizen saw my queen ready to take his rook if he decided to take my bishop, and instead moved the knight next to my bishop. I moved one of my knights to take one of Aizen's pawns, which he then took with an adjacent pawn. I backed up into the pawn with my queen and nabbed it. Aizen stared at me momentarily before moving his king 1 space to my left. I took a good look at the board and smirked. "Say, Aizen, what say we raise the stakes on this game?" "What are you betting?" he asked. "If I win, I want you to take me with you back to wherever it is the Soul Reapers reside and have me enrolled in training," I declared. "I thought you might ask me at some point," Aizen folded one hand over his other. "You knew I'd turn down your request if you asked plainly out of the blue, so your judgment of my character as a man of my word led you to gamble such a proposition on the outcome of the game. Very well, Lelouch Lamperouge, I accept your terms. However, what do I get if I win?" "What do you want?" I asked. "I'm not a man without honor either, Aizen." "Very well then," Aizen said. "If I win—" He glanced around. I followed his eyes. They landed upon Rengoku. "You came here with that girl, did you not?" "What do you want with Rengoku?" I asked. "If I win, I would like you and her to meet me in the nearby forest. I'm working on an experiment, and you two are just the souls I need to further it," Aizen stated. "How is that an equal proposition? Surely you can find specimens anywhere. What makes us so special?" I asked. "Experimentation on Rukengai citizens gets a little iffy with the red tape I get saddled with. You and that child are high-quality specimens for my research. I would like to gain your consent if I win this match," Aizen answered. A hand was suddenly placed on my shoulder, and Jin whispered into my ear, "Lamperouge-san, if you'd accept this and lose, I'll castrate ya in your sleep. Just a fair warning." "I don't plan to lose, so don't worry about it," I said with a dark expression, staring straight at Aizen. "The stakes have risen, the game is set. I'm going to win." I believe it was your turn before this interesting conversation started, Aizen reminded me. I'm aware, I said with a friendly tone. At the same time I was discussing things with Aizen, I had been given time to carefully analyze the board. I had properly recognized the situation I was in and acted accordingly. I moved my king 1 square to my right. Aizen checked it. I took his bishop with my knight, knowing that he would take it with his queen and put my king back in check. I blocked with my other bishop. Aizen moved his queen away from my king. I then moved my queen up so that it was in line with his king and my bishop at the end of the board. Check. Aizen put his queen in front of his king. I moved my rook so that it was in line with my queen and Aizen's queen and king. This would be the point of the game that I would understand Aizen's true nature as I have with many other players. Aizen had 2 options right now. He could move his king to either side of my queen and rook, prolonging the game, but allowing me to claim his queen. He could take my queen with his queen, which I would take my rook, put his king in check, forcing him to move it now only to bring my other rook across the board and check him again, to which Aizen's options would soon be limited and I would win. Or he could do nothing about the situation and move one of his last remaining pawns. No matter what Aizen did, the match was mine. He responded by committing to double queen sacrifice. I took his queen with my rook. He moved, I checked. He moved his king forward and to my right. I brought my rook in line with my pawn next to Aizen's king, and then Aizen moved his king above my pawn. I brought my other rook to be in line with Aizen's king. Aizen moved his king to the other side of my pawn. I moved my pawn and took back my queen. Checkmate. Aizen had no moves. He couldn't take my queen. That option was made impossible by my rook. His only other option that would have been open to him was blocked by my bishop that had been sitting in the corner for several turns. Aizen looked at the board, then back at me, and then back at the board, and then back at me. He sighed, put his finger on his king, and tipped it over. The winner of the chess tournament is Lamperouge Lelouch, the host announced. I was given a trophy and a medal, and Aizen got a plaque similar to the one Jin had shown me yesterday. After all the applause and congratulations, rather after I was finally allowed to be alone, Aizen approached me. That was a marvelous game you played, Lamperouge-san, Aizen said to me. That's the first time I've ever lost at chess. Well played. Thank you. Now about our deal. I haven't forgotten, and I am a man of my word, Lamperouge-san. You may accompany my squadron and I back to the Saratai, Aizen told me. Thank you, I bowed low. I was in the presence of a high-ranking military officer, so I felt the need to show respect. Lelouch-kun, Rangaku ran up to me. Lelouch-kun, are you really leaving? Rangaku asked me. I nodded. My place is with the Soul Reapers. No, stay one more night, please, Rangaku pleaded. I bent down and pat her head. Sorry, but destiny calls and I'm not asking it to leave a message. I took the medal off my neck and gave Rangaku the trophy. Here, I told her, I have no use for trinkets and gimmicks. Sell this at a pawn shop so you and Jin don't have to eat fruit washed in a nearby pond. Rangaku set the trophy down. Then I'm going to train. Train? I questioned. Rangaku nodded. I'm going to grow big and strong, and I'll show up at the academy to join you someday. Rangaku seemed all fired up. I smiled at her. You do that. Who knows, maybe we'll run into each other again. I untied my jacket from around my waist and put it on. I pulled on the front to fit it better. Aizen, let's go. He, his followers, and I walked off into the sunset. Our destination, the Soul Reaper Academy. Aizen brought me to the Saratai and dumped me off at the Shino Academy. We parted ways and I just gave my obligatory thanks for the lift and for bringing me here. Afterwards I signed myself up and was given a uniform and a sword, and it was not a low-quality wooden or plastic replica sword either. I was given an actual, sharp-edged katana. It was about 4 feet long and had a dirt brown, cylindrical handle. The hilt was gray and the guard was silver and circular. I was told that this would be my Zanpakuto, and let me tell you, they didn't just hand it to me like they had these things in stock or something. They ripped it out from within me, and that hurt. A lot. I was given a manual, a room key, an academy map, and sent on my way. At least those items were taken from out of a storage bin. I used the map to find my room, entered into it, and changed into my uniform. The uniform wasn't the greatest fit. The sleeves were a little baggy and the pants felt like they were falling off on me. but a tighter tying of my sash solved that problem. As I looked at the way I was dressed, I had a brief recall of the Tambata festival I went to Suzaku with when I was a kid. That seemed like a completely different lifetime now, which it was ironically. I fastened my Zanpakuto to my waist, following the instructions in the manual I was given, and then got down to reading the thick book through. It didn't take me more than a few hours to memorize it all. Reading it taught me a great deal about the world I would be living in, but it wasn't enough, so I checked out a few books from the student library and read and memorized the contents of those as well. I learned a lot from all that reading. For starters, my Zanpakuto was essentially a part of my soul. Right now it took the appearance of just a normal sword, but as I bonded with its appearance would readily change. If I bonded with it enough, I would learn something called shikai, which would allow me to unlock its special power. If I trained with it for a really long time, I could learn something called bankai. Bankai was the final form of a Zanpakuto, and it took 10 years to master. It was said that very few soul reapers ever achieved bankai. It was a requirement if one was to become a captain, and sometimes learning bankai could prove fatal to the learner. My research also turned up what I would learn here. Soul reapers were masters of 4 basic arts. The first art, Zanjutsu, was one's proficiency with their Zanpakuto. Besides just being given classes focusing on communing with one's Zanpakuto, students were also taught proper form of the sword in kendo classes where shinai and boken were passed out so that students wouldn't be severely hurt or injured in duels. The second art was Hakuda, also known as hand-to-hand combat. Both this and Zanjutsu I figured would be the hardest for me to master considering my low stamina and low physical strength. The third art was called Ho-Ho, the speed arts. This included learning an art called Shunpo, the flash step. Again, it would be difficult to master given my horrible physical aptitude. The last art was called Kaido, or demon arts. Kaido I figured I could be good at. It required memorization of long incantations and precise movement patterns. It also required precise focus and spirit particle, also known as Rise-Heat, usage. There were 2 types of Kaido, Hado, the destruction arts, and Bakudo, the binding arts. All Kaido was given a number from 1 to 99. The higher the number, the more powerful, complex, draining the Kaido was. According to one of the books, Kaido was taught rather than listed. Kaido required practice in order to fully master and understand. Also, there were 10 Kaido of each type that were forbidden to be taught. To learn it was fine, but to use these Kaido was forbidden by law by the Central 46 because these arts were just that powerful. The more you outlaw something, the more you're going to make people want to do it just to spite the law, I had thought when I read that particular part of the book I had been reading. I learned more than just about the arts of soul reapers and also about Zanpakuto. I also learned about the organization I was training to become a part of. The Gauti 13 was the Soul Society's military organization. They were devoted to helping spirits move on to the afterlife and also purifying corrupted souls anew, sort of like how bleach can be used to remove stains from clothes. The Gauti 13 was aptly named for its 13 squads. Each squad stood for something different. The first squad was the squad of the captain commander, the man who currently held that position, and had been doing so for nearly 8.5 centuries, now was a man by the name of Genrosai Shichikuni Yamamoto. People who were in his squad were important, or rather they were considered such by the other 12 divisions. The second division, currently under the captaincy of Yoruichi Shihoin, was closely connected to the widely known Onmitsukido, also called the Stealth Force. This was due to the fact that the Shihoin noble family, one of the great noble families of the Soul Society, was closely connected to the Stealth Force. Because of this, the squad readily recruited Soul Reapers with a specialization in stealth and other skills that involved being sneaky. It was almost like the squad was trying to create an entire division devoted to assassination. The third division, currently under the guidance of Treva Hoshima, was devoted to pragmatism. According to the manual, their symbol, the marigold, represented despair. They were known for getting the job done with whatever means necessary. Some squad members had gained a reputation for being cold-hearted and cruel. The fourth division was the medical division. It had been under the guidance of Captain Ristu Anohana for more than 200 years. Not many Soul Reapers in that division saw much combat, but to be in that squad your proficiency had to be healing Kaido and a want to work with others. Not my idea of doing my duty, but it sounded like an option regardless. The 5th Division was currently guided by a man by the name of Shinji Hirako. Captain Hirako's squad was devoted mainly to Kaido. Interestingly enough, this was Aizen's squad. I thought a lot about joining that division after 6 years of hard work in the academy, but I wasn't sure about joining the same division as Aizen. Call me paranoid, but something about that guy rubbed me the wrong way. The 6th Division was a division known for 2 things: soul reapers with high proficiency in Ho-Ho and Shunpo, and that the division had had a captain who was a member of the noble Kuchiki family for quite a while now. The current head of the division was a man by the name of Jinrei Kuchiki. The 7th Division was under the guidance of a man with the odd name of Love Ikawa. The squad, for a long time now, was known for having high manpower. Literally, very few women were in that squad, and most of the members of the squad, especially the high-ranking ones, the lieutenant included, all were supposed to follow every male stereotype in the book according to what I read. The 8th Division was almost the opposite of that. Under the captaincy of Shunsui Kairaku, the squad was known for having a lot of laid-back members, and also a lot of rather physically attractive members. Don't why it's that way, but one thing is for certain: I do not want to be in that squad unless there's no other option. I am here to serve, not look good while doing it. The 9th Division sounded like the kind of division Suzaku could be in if he were here. 9th Division was led by a man by the name of Kensei Moguruma. According to what I read, the 9th Division sounded more and more like your typical boot camp. You were worked like a dog, and you either came out a wreck or a hardened soldier after putting in some time there. The 10th Division's captain was a woman by the name of Mary Akari. The division itself was known for accepting members with talents in all fields, but mastery of none. It was also known for having 2 captains, over the course of time, that were considered child prodigies that only come once every generation. The 11th Division was the division known for having high-class fighters. The squad's captain was always the current Kenpachi. In other words, it was the guy who was known as the generation's most powerful warrior, one without equal. The division's members were all extremely proficient at fighting in every Soul Reaper art save one, Kaido. Apparently the division was all about direct fighting, and Kaido was considered cowardly. The 12th Division was run by Kiryu Hikifune, a woman of amazing intelligence. Her squad was known for having amazing minds. Sadly, there was nothing for them to do it with. The Gotai was rather short on cutting-edge technology, which surprised me considering the kind of world I came from. Then again, Soul Society had the souls of the dead coming from all over the universe. I guess to some it would seem a downgrade and an upgrade to others. I myself belonged to the former. And finally, the 13th Division seemed rather similar to the 10th from the information I was privy to about it. The only difference was that captain of the 13th Division, Jusho Yukitake, was not only a noble, but he was also stated as being more friendlier with his subordinates, like a father to his men. Captain Akari was reportedly stricter and more apathetic towards her troops. Beyond all this, I had also learned other important facts about the Gotai, like the chain of command. It went from unseated officers to seated officers all the way up the ranks, to the captains, to the captain commander. Central 46, the Royal Guard, and something called the Soul King. No details on that last power were given, just that it existed. I figured I'd have research to do as I climbed in ranks, assuming I would. The more I read, the more it seemed like captains were like human-sized nightmare frames with how much power they were supposed to hold. I chuckled at the thought of my ability ever getting good enough for captaincy. Of course, according to the handbook, there were 3 ways to become captain. The first was to pass the captain's exam. It was an exam used to measure the potential captain's abilities and was observed by 3 captains, one of which must be the head captain himself. The second way to become captain was to be personally recommended by 6 captains and be approved by 3 of the remaining 7. To get in that way, from the sound of it, meant you either had to have a superb reputation or be really good at sucking up to authority. Still, from reading the Gotai's history, if that had ever happened, it was evident that the incompetent captains were either discharged or killed in action. Also, what I had learned was that there were 3 types of spirit particles: Raizhi, Ryoryoku, and Ryayatsu. Raizhi was free spirit particles in the air. Everything in the Soul Society was made of Raizhi. In other words, all matter was also potential energy. An odd design for the afterlife, but no doubt a convenient one, I suspected. Ryoryoku was spiritual power, or the amount of force a soul could exert when utilizing Raisi or spiritual energy. The final type, Ryatsu, was spiritual pressure. This was the energy built up inside souls and were especially abundant in soul reapers. My Ryatsu was what made Rengoku collapse a few times. However, according to the material I was reading, Captain Class Ryatsu made my Ryatsu the equivalent of comparing Suzaku's Lancelot with an old-fashioned heavy armored tank. There was only so much information I could be privy to at my current rank as a student. I could only learn more by becoming useful to the Gotai and becoming a full-fledged soul reaper. According to the guidebook, training took 6 years normally. Of course, first I'd have to pass my entrance exam, which would be tomorrow. There was no reading material on it, which didn't surprise me. What would be the point? If you were in, you were in. If you failed, you failed. There would be no point of letting students, and potential students, have access to materials pertaining to the exam. If they did, that would be cheating. A thought in the back of my mind nagged me to use my Geass to learn more about the exam, maybe even rig it so that I would pass it no matter how badly I embarrassed myself, but I discarded the thought. I would not use my Geass ever again. It was a tool that served me well in life and corrupted me to the point where I had to make the ultimate sacrifice to wash all the blood off my hands. Even now I think some of that blood lingers. I would work hard and honestly to become a soul reaper. I don't know why I still had the Geass. I should have lost it. I don't want it anymore. Some would say there was a reason that I still have it, but it's a curse. A curse I would hide and go on to my next life with no one else the wiser. The room I was given was a single-person bedroom, barren of all objects save a bookshelf, which I stacked with the books I checked out of the academy library, a bed, which upon testing was rather comfortable compared to how I had slept yesterday, and low-rising wooden table with a cushion placed near it, obviously to be used for studying and doing bookwork, I assumed. It was still midday, so I decided to take a look around the area, see what the Soul Reaper life would have in store for me for the next 6 years. I acted like I was going to pass, but there was no guarantee I would. This was unlike taking an exam at school at Ashford. At a school you'd be taught some material, take some notes, study them, and take a test based on it. This was different. I had no idea what would be expected of me in the least. In all my years of living, never once did I feel so out of control of my own fate. Even before I had the Geass, I could always make some form of prediction of my destined future, but not this time. This time I would be going in blindly. I could desire to pass the exam tomorrow with every fiber of my being, but fate did not have to be so kind. In fact, I wasn't owed anything from the afterlife given my actions. Let this be the only time I need to face such a daunting task, I thought to myself. As I took a stroll around the area, I saw students laughing, walking and talking with each other. I was reminiscent of my days in Ashford Academy. I imagined that if I passed the exam that things could be similar to how they once were. I shook my head slowly and discarded the thought. I'm not here to make friends or socialize. I'm here to become a soldier in order to protect others too weak to protect themselves and to start anew. I will continue to wash away the blood that has stained my hands. As I had made half a loop around premises, a voice called out to me. Worried about the exam tomorrow? I looked to my right where the voice had come from. Leaning against a support beam was a woman with brown eyes and long black hair tied in a ponytail. She was dressed in the regular Soul Reaper uniform, but was wearing a red vest, signifying her as one of the female instructors of the academy. She looked older than me. People aged slower here in the Soul Society from what I'd read, so it was impossible to tell anyone's biological age, but physically I'd say she couldn't be old than 26. You can tell? I questioned. It's easy to tell the newcomers and the ones who are worried, she said with a smug smile and her arms folded. Their spiritual pressure leaks everywhere and it fluctuates to reflect their inner apprehension. You're the third person I've stopped that I've taken notice showing such signs. I had no cause to argue with a teacher of the academy, but I didn't want to get friendly either, so I just turned my head and said nothing. Boy, you're a real go-getter, aren't you? The teacher said. Loosen up, maybe get something to eat. Being all tensed up like you are is just going to make things harder for you tomorrow. What's your name, by the way? Lelouch, Lamperouge Lelouch, I responded. I had read that this place was more like feudal Japan. Therefore honorifics and giving one's surname first were common here. I'm Emily, Rox Emily, she introduced herself. So Lelouch, how do you like your potential living environment? Seems nice enough, I answered. A thought clicked in my mind, and I realized I had a golden opportunity to ask some questions and get some answers. I may not be able to learn anything about the entrance exam, but I knew the perfect way to ease the inner tension I had it. I would put my faith in the one thing that had always been a boon to me, probability and statistics. I turned my head back towards the teacher and put on a smile. Sensei, approximately how many students that come to the academy every year pass the entrance exams? Well, your attitude changed on a dime, she chuckled to herself. She folded one arm under her butts and put her elbow on her wrist while she scratched her chin with the side of her index finger. Let's see, we get about 1,000 to 20 students every year. I'd say about 4 out of 5 students pass the exams. Good odds to start with, I told myself. Where do you typically get most of the students that come to the academy? I asked. Well, let's see, Rock-sensei looked up at the sky again to think. I'd say that for every 100 students that arrive here that a majority of them come from the Rukengai. How many would you say? I asked. Ah, a numbers man are you? She asked with a wide smile. She went back to her thinking pose. Let's see. If I had to make an estimate, I'd say maybe 90% of all of our students come from the Rukengai districts, and for those that do, I'd say the bulk of them come from the lower districts. Exact numbers if you would, sensei, I said. Rock-sensei hummed to herself as she did mental math. Well, out of 100 recruits, I'd say 80 are going to pass, and of those 80, that 8 will be from noble families, 50 will be from Upper Rukengai, and the rest from Lower Rukengai. I'm from Rukengai Sector 64. Does it matter which region? I asked. Not really, it's all the same dividend, Rock-sensei answered. Well, I'd say that out of the amount of people we get from your district, we really only get 4 out of every 9 that pass. Great, so we're back to 50-50 where I started, and to make matters worse, I'm down even lower than before. My cheerful mood was waning. However, your spiritual pressure is rather abundant from someone of your region. In fact, if I didn't know any better, I'd put you on par with some of the lower-ranking nobles, Rock-sensei stated. I cupped my chin. That does make some sense. More than I'd like it to, actually. Your Ryatsu seems to have calmed down Lelouch, I heard Rock-sensei say. I looked at her with a slightly confused expression. I don't know what you're thinking. Personally, I don't care. But I want you to know that I think you'll do fine tomorrow. Take it from someone who has been teaching here for 7 years. If I think I see a well-based recruit, you can be sure your exam is as good as passed. I'm not one to place my faith in the promises and words of others, I said coldly, but I appreciate your vote of confidence for what it's worth. My Ryatsu could be so powerful it could trounce the head captain, but my stamina and endurance are pitiful. I haven't had much time to train. My eyebrows converged to a resolved gaze. I think I'll get something to eat and prepare for tomorrow. Good luck, Lelouch, she told me. I walked on without saying a word. I had something to eat, went back to my room, and prepared for tomorrow. If Suzaku and CC had seen me, they would have been pointing and laughing. I looked really pathetic trying to physically prepare myself with push-ups, sit-ups, and stretches. By the time I was done, I was completely drained, and by the look of the analog clock on my wall, I had only been doing things for less than a half an hour. Damn it, I thought as I panted. This is getting me nowhere. There has to be something else I can do to prepare for tomorrow that doesn't involve feeling like I'm killing myself. I sat up and went over to my bookshelf and got my student manual. I memorized all the basic information, but what I needed were pointers and details. Also, it never hurt to double-check and make sure I had my facts straight, not when so much was at stake. I flipped open to a page about Zanpakuto. It discussed Jizen, the position that soul reapers used for meditation in order to talk with their Zanpakuto. I decided to give it a try. It was worth a shot. I sat down in a cross-legged position with my Zanpakuto in my lap and meditated. I tried clearing my mind and emptying it, but all that would come to me were haunting images of my life. I left Nunnally weeping over me. I watched as Suzaku plunged the sword I gave him into me. It was a montage of my life and all moments filled with blood, tears, and darkness. My eyes flew open, and I bent my torso forward and panted. That was not how communication was described in the least. If anything, all I did was haunt myself with memories of the past. Memories I was trying to forget. I looked at the clock only to realize the sun had already set. That's odd, I said and got to my feet. Before I had sat in Jizen the sun wasn't even setting, but now all of a sudden it was pitch black out. I looked at the clock on the wall. Is it that late already? I asked aloud to no one. I shook my head slightly and picked up my Zanpakuto off the ground to put it back in its scabbard. As I did I noticed it had changed. Well, it was either that or my eyes were playing tricks on me in the darkness. The guard had changed. It was now thin and rectangular. Other than that nothing much had changed. Did I make some progress after all? I wondered. I felt too tired to think on it, and since it was late I put my Zanpakuto under my bed, took off my socks and sandals and went to sleep. Tomorrow I would take my entrance exam and hopefully I would pass and become a soul reaper. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 2. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Drakonishiro21 on fanfiction.net. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.